Hello everybody, ETCG1 here, also known as Eric the Car Guy. How are you? I hope you're well. So what's our topic of today? Well, our topic of today is pricing. The discussion of the flat rate system seemed to bring about a lot of good questions and good statements about the flat rate system, but also brought up a discussion about pricing in general and the fairness to the customer. That was one of the things in that flat rate system that seemed to come out was the notion that the customer may be not being treated fairly in some instances. And I can understand where you're coming from on that. So I thought I would just take a minute to talk about pricing. Now, I make it a point not to talk specifically about numbers on my channel. And one of the reasons for that is because from what I've found in my experience is that pricing is regional. Some places, some larger metropolitan areas may be charging more for their labor than, say, a not so large area. And if I go out there and I start saying, well, this should cost this or this should cost this, I don't really think it's my place to do that because of pricing. And how this relates to the whole flat rate system thing is the idea behind, not the mechanic side of it, but the business side of the flat rate system is that you have a fixed cost with your labor. At least in my experience, you don't really make your money as a shop on your labor so much. You really make it on your parts markups. And that's a subject for another video, but we're just gonna stick with that for now. And I'm hoping this little fruit fly thing stops flying on the lens for you. Sorry about that. You need to come up with what it's gonna cost you per hour to run your operation. That is, pay your employees, keep the lights on, pay the sewer, pay the garbage, pay the insurance, pay your accounting, pay your taxes. All those things need to come into account. By the time you're done figuring up all those things, probably a good thing to do is figure out what that's going to cost you for an entire month, just as a benchmark. You look at all those costs and then you break it down to your hours of operation, like when you're open, and how much you need to make per hour in order to cover those costs. So you add all those things up, your rent, all that stuff, you add all that up, and you come up with a number, and that's the amount that you have to make in order to keep the doors open. Then you need to add just a little bit more than that so you got some breathing room, because a lot of those monthly costs are not fixed. In fact, especially like your electric bill, things like that, those are not fixed costs. They're going to vary depending upon the season. So you have to account for those variances, and that's going to get you pretty close to what your labor rate is per hour. And don't forget paying the technician and all that. Health insurance, whatever that costs, because ultimately your labor costs, you're gonna kind of break even. You're not really gonna make a whole lot, because and anything you do have overage in that is gonna be for those unexpected things. Because I can tell you, when you're in business, you need to keep a little money aside for things that are unexpected. So how this relates to the whole flat rate system thing is, if you are paying somebody to get a job done and you want to go, well, actually, let's back up. I think the most important part of this whole pricing process is talking to the customer. You need to have a heart-to-heart, come to Jesus, whatever you want to call it, with your customer before you ever begin work. Because I can tell you the most important part of your job as a shop owner is to make sure that your customers understand the work that's being done. In other words, we don't want somebody at the counter basically talking really fast, throwing a bunch of terms at a customer so that they're ultimately confused by the whole process, just give up and hand you their credit card. That happens a lot. I started Eric the Car Guy for those people, to try and cut through the gobbledygook that they were being told so that they could come here and get accurate information about what needs to be done in a given instance. If nothing else, I've got video evidence of what it takes to do. Why is this costing me so much? Well, it's because we have to pull your engine in order to change the oil in your front differential. And what's a differential? And those questions come up, but I'm going to say that the flat rate system can work if you've got a good estimate and if you sit down and the customer understands the work that needs to be performed and the effort involved in that work being performed. Many of you brought up a great point. What about an older car that gets all rusty? The cars that they base the labor times off of aren't all rusty. They're new cars. So you're going to have problems like with bolts breaking, things like that during the whole course of the repair. So as a result, if you're going to go by those times that were done with a nice new car where everything works out perfectly and try to compare them to an older car that may have been in a collision, that may have rusted all to heck and gone, you can't compare those two because there's going to have to be some extra time that's given for those circumstances, that unknown factor. I can tell you right now, you can sell this, but you have to bring the customer in and you have to let them understand what it is that they're paying for. And more important than anything else, and if you're in a situation where you say, okay, we're going to go in here, and while we're in here, this might break. It's done this to us before, we've had a bad experience with it, and I just want you to be prepared that this may be the extra expense. Now, we're not going to charge you any extra labor if it's something that you don't need to charge extra labor for, but we are going to have to charge you for the part. That's preparation for the customer. That's where the system will work. The system really works best if the customer is aware of what is being done, why it is being done, and you stick to how much you tell them it's going to cost. You do those things, you're being fair to the customer. I don't care if you bill them an hour and you get it done in 15 minutes. And you're going to get mad at me for saying that. Some of you are going to get mad at me for saying that. But I want you to consider those other times when you tell a customer it's going to take an hour and it ends up taking you all day, and you end up eating that because you want to stick to your estimate and you want to take care of your customer. Because that also happens. And you have to look at the big picture. You can't just look at it instance by instance. Also with a particular customer. Like maybe that customer came in who got that 8 hour, 7 hours worth of free labor. Well, the next time they come in, you're up a half an hour on that 7 hours because you were able to do something in a half an hour that you charged an hour for. I don't want you to feel bad about that because you're really estimating cost. And estimating is the key word there. It's an estimate. It's not written in stone so much. I mean, it's an estimate of how much you think something is going to cost. But once again, the customer needs to be in the loop. If you have the customer in the loop, and if you have the customer's best interest at heart, even if you're making out with your labor, once again, remember, your labor is really not where you're making your money. Your labor is covering your overhead. Then I'm not going to say everybody's happy because everybody's not always happy, but that's how it works. And I got to tell you, those of you that are expecting this whole perfect world thing to happen, it doesn't exist, all right? It might exist up here inside, between your ears, but it does not exist out here in the real world, all right? So you have to plan for the inevitable failure because it's going to happen. And you have to account for that when you're writing your estimates. So, in summary, flat rate system. I didn't like it at first, personally. However, after learning the system and getting into the system and dealing with the politics, eventually I grew to accept it. Is it the best system in the world? Offer me an alternative. How about that? Offer me an alternative. You salary guys that are out there getting paid a salary. Well, let me just say this. Those of you out there that are talking about the customer and having the customer's best interest at heart, thank you so much for that. Because, we talked about bad mechanics and everything else. It is really great for me to know that there's people out there that give a crap about what they do. They take pride in their work, and thank you for that. I'm serious. Thank you for that. We need more of that in this system. We need less of the crap that we saw in that investigative report. We need less of the lazy techs that are not giving people what they're paying for. We need a lot less of that. We need a lot more integrity. And if we all start doing this together collectively, kumbaya, all that kind of thing, if we all start doing this collectively, we can bring ourselves up as a profession. I, as Eric the Car Guy, want to do that very thing. I don't want the technician to always be seen as some dirty guy who's just taking your money, because that's not the case. I'm a dirty guy who's giving you good service, and that's it. That's all I want to do, because I love what I do. Enough said about that. In summary, sit down with your customer. Let them know how much it's going to cost. Figure out what a good, for those of you out there that are looking to, start your own business, whatever, I hear that a lot from you. Just know that it's a long road. It's a long road, and it's going to be a while before you figure it all out. You're going to make mistakes. But don't make the mistake of underselling yourself. Sit down and figure out what your overhead is. Incorporate that into your labor cost, whatever that price may be. Whatever that price may be, that's the cost of doing business. It's not personal. Understand that. Business is business. Personal, that's something else. Enough said. Talk to your customers. Bring them in. Do good work. Care about what you do. I'll be proud of you if you do. I will, if that means anything to you. I'm Eric the Car Guy. You can always find me at ericthecarguy.com or follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Links down below. Anyway, be safe, have fun, and of course, stay dirty. That was a boob shot. See ya.